This is Carolina Business Review. Major support provided by High Point University, the premier life skills university focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
It is important to remember that there is not a small difference between how people feel about the economy and the actual commercial activity happening. Welcome again to the most widely watched and the longest running dialogue on Carolina business, policy, and public affairs. I am Chris William. Happy spring, almost happy summer. We are seemingly days away from high school graduations, summer vacations, beach trips, etc. And all of those are certainly feel-good things for sure, but many don't feel good about the economy. And if you look at the data and talk to an economist, oh, and by the way, what we will in a moment, you will get the sense that by the numbers, the economy is not necessarily bad. We'll start right there in our dialogue. And later on, the Spoleto Festival USA is a premier performing arts festival held annually in Charleston for now a generation. Joining us again will be its general director, Dr. Mena Hanna. Stay with us.
Major funding also by Foundation for the Carolinas, a catalyst for philanthropy and driver of civic engagement, helping individuals, nonprofits, and companies bring their charitable visions to life. Truliant Federal Credit Union, proudly serving the Carolinas since 1952 by focusing on what truly matters, our members' financial success. Welcome to Brighter Banking. And Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation on which our communities improve and grow. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Dr. Nicholas J. Hill, Dean of the School of Business, Claflin University, Mark Vitner of Piedmont Crescent Capital, and special guest, Mena Hanna, General Director, Spoleto Festival USA.
Welcome again to our program. We are glad to see you and glad to have you here. So let's start our dialogue. Mark Vitner and Dr. Nicholas Hill join us. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Mark, I didn't mention you by name on the open of the program, but here you are, well-known economist in the Carolinas. We're going to start with you. Is there a large delta, a large gap between how people feel about the economy and the actual numbers?
Well, in the latest data, there's about the largest gap between how people feel about the economy and what the economic numbers say about the economy that I've ever seen. Consumer confidence has plunged really in the last 4 months. And it's come down as the trade rhetoric heated up, and then it just plummeted after the Liberation Day announcements. But the economic data looks pretty solid. We did have a 0.3% drop in GDP, but final demand grew at a 3% annual rate, and the employment numbers are still looking pretty solid. In the Carolinas, we're kind of going counter to the rest of the country. The country seems to be losing momentum. The Carolinas have actually gained momentum, and some of that has come as folks have taken a second look at Florida, and we've seen an out-migration from Florida, and it's really reflected in South Carolina, which added nearly as many people in 2024 as North Carolina did.
So, Dr. Hill, we'll bring you into the dialogue. I know you're not an economist, Nicholas, but gosh, you know a little something about business as the dean of the B School down at Claflin. I mean, what's the sense? You just heard Mark. Do you have that same feeling, or is there something different that you see?
No, I think that Mark is right on with that. I think when you start to look at uncertainty in the market, consumers start to have less confidence about long-term expenditures and things like that. However, one of the things that we're seeing with the migration data and migration patterns, Carolinas, North as well as South, are positioned in a good pocket of the United States to where those from the North want to come to this area because of the weather and the landscape, and those who are like in Florida who are trying to avoid some of the natural disasters and things like that, they're coming up. So you see this inward migration of people to this area that's helping sustain some of the economic GDP that's going on within these two states as well.
So the dichotomy, Mark, let me come back to you. The dichotomy between feeling and actual data, empirical evidence and just how people feeling kind of jiggy about things. Does one beget the other? And in this case, will these negative, uncertain, maybe even doomsday feelings, will they end up being, will we talk ourselves into a slowdown?
Well, that's a concern. I've done a lot of research with consumer confidence, and the bottom line is that the consumer confidence index has not been a particularly good predictor of consumer behavior, at least in the short term. Over the long term, it's a very good predictor. And I think the Fed, in their latest meeting at the May FOMC meeting, Chairman Powell said that the Fed was going to wait and see how the data actually played themselves out into before they would choose whether or not to cut interest rates. When you look at the consumer confidence data, you see this huge spike in inflation expectations, which goes along with the tariff announcements. That could be self-fulfilling if consumers rush ahead and pull purchases forward, and that could actually pull inflation higher. Now, we're already seeing that in used car prices, which jumped 5% over the last month.
Let me expand out a little bit, Nicholas, and we'll go in a different direction here. About 5 years ago now, almost exactly 5 years ago, on this program, we were in the midst of COVID, and it's hard to believe when you say it out loud like that, but we had a panel of college presidents, university presidents. One of them was Dr. Elizabeth Davis from Furman University. And she predicted at that time, we were all kind of reeling from this new reality we were living in to be remote. And she predicted on this program, she said that there will definitely be some consolidations in schools. It will be a disruptor of college and universities, of higher education finance. And lo and behold, here we are 5 years later. We've seen some of that, particularly in the last 2 weeks. We have seen Limestone University in Gaffney, South Carolina. We've seen St. Andrews University in Laurinburg, North Carolina, both closed down. And I know this puts you in a particular position at another school, Claflin in this case, but what's your sense? Do you think that there are more consolidations, more school closings coming?
So I really believe that, when you start to look at some of your smaller institutions, their driving force behind their operation budget becomes enrollment. And so then we look at the trend of how college enrollment is going across the country, and it's on a decline. So just examples that if you start to lose students as they start to come in, you're going to have less operating revenue from tuition that you can use to run your university. So some tough decisions are going to have to kind of be made. And I really believe when you think about COVID, right after COVID, a lot of students were thinking about, I need to take time off before I go to college. So that's even contributed to the decrease, quote unquote, in enrollment. But one thing I would let the viewers just know is that the value proposition for education still is the same, is that the more education you have, the higher your salary income. That's been the trend, and that's the data there. The more degrees that you have, the more income you can demand when you come to the job market.
Mark, notwithstanding the Harvard and the Columbias and the Yales and the expanded issues that go on at those higher ed, the Ivies in this case, what are the alarm bells ringing in higher ed?
Well, I think demographics is one of them, where the number of people that are coming of college age is not growing. Also, the clampdown on immigration. A lot of schools, not the two schools that closed in the Carolinas, but a lot of schools have become very dependent upon foreign students, which pay full price tuition. Here in the Carolinas, we were focused on the schools that are closing. Two of the more successful private universities have been Elon and High Point, which have really marketed themselves very well in the Northeast. Just about every time that I would go up to visit in in New England and in the Mid-Atlantic states, I'd run into people who had come down to the Carolinas, and they typically had visited Elon, High Point, and Wake Forest on their trip down here, and came away very impressed. And if you look at the enrollment of those schools, they've really that's one of the outlets that they've looked at. And I think that's what schools are going to have to do in this new environment. Is they're going to have to look to pull in students from other parts of the country.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, stay with us. We're going to meet our guest in just a moment. Before we do that, coming up on this program, he is the new Secretary of Commerce for North Carolina. His name is Lee Lilly. Secretary Lilly will be a guest on this program. Also, Scout Motors made a pretty big splash. You remember the old International Harvester brand, and this Scout that was an SUV was actually a utility vehicle. It's the new Scout, and it's the new Scout Motors that put a big stake in the ground, both literally and economically, in the state of South Carolina. That CEO, Scott Keogh, will be our guest on this program as well. Spoleto Festival USA is in now its 49th year in the Low Country. It's an internationally recognized as America's premier performing arts festival for sure, but it's meant to foster cultural exchange between American and European artist traditions, among other things. It runs for 17 days and nights starting Memorial Day weekend in Charleston's historic theaters, churches, outdoor venues. With about 150 performances, it features a wide range of disciplines from opera, theater, dance, symphonic, chamber, choral, jazz, folk even. It's iconically Charleston. Joining us now from Spoleto in Charleston is the General Director, Dr. Mena Mark Hanna. Mr. Director, welcome to the program. It's nice to see you again, Mena.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So we have to clear this up, and I know you hear this all the time. Is it Spoleto or Spoleto?
I say Spoleto. I think if you're speaking in Italian, you can say Spoleto, but I like Spoleto.
Okay, well, thank you, Spoleto. We'll go with that. But Dr. Hanna, thank you, and welcome again to the program. There was, on our program, we had the tourism chiefs from North and South Carolina, both Dwayne Parrish and Whit Tuttle, and they surprisingly said that so far in 2025, the tourism numbers have been down, soft, I think is the term that they used. When you look at that, when you see that, is that something you can identify with? When you look at the numbers from Spoleto early on, do you see that, or do you see something different?
Yeah, if you track our ticket sales and what we are projected for our ticket sales, you definitely see that we started out with our public on sale in February extremely strong. Actually, we had the strongest single day of ticket sales since 2016. And then, through March and April, this is sort of an inverse parabolic curve. It's kind of like a bell curve, an inverse bell curve. You see it slow down, and we are seeing right now a ticket sales slowdown that is probably attributed to a soft tourism market. So I think we're seeing some of the effects of that.
One of the things that the tourism chief said, that they saw that foreign visits were down. That probably is not going to be a surprise to anyone, given kind of the tough trade talk that's gone back and forth across developed countries, at least. Does that foreign, do you see that same thing when it comes to foreign visitors? Do you track it on that kind of granularity?
We do track foreign visitors, people coming in from other countries. We have started to see, after the pandemic, more of Spoleto's sales be indexed toward local, tri-county, regional sales rather than national and international sales. So I would say before 2020, it was 60% national, international, 40% local on average. Now it's closer to 50-50.
And tri-county would be Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester.
And Dorchester, correct.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm going to open up to our panel. Dr. Hill, please take a shot here.
Mena, thank you for the festival. I'll enjoy it every time I've been down there to participate. I am interested to know, kind of where do you see it kind of growing and going? What is your vision for the festival to grow?
Thank you so much for that question. Next year is the 50th festival, which is certainly a threshold moment for Spoleto. And 2026, our 50th festival, 2027, our 50th anniversary, we will be celebrating this legacy institution over those 2 seasons. I see Spoleto really becoming an institution that spills out into the streets, that's got this catalytic impact on the city for those 17 days, is an artistic capital of the world for those 17 days that draws the world into Charleston, but at the same time understands its local community. I mean, since Spoleto's founding in 1977, Charleston's artistic ecosystem has flourished. It was a sort of bold experiment in the beginning, and it shared one single foundation, one that supports musicians, dancers, composers, educators, institutions large and small. And that creative network, woven across neighborhoods, generations, and disciplines, I think that has helped shape Charleston's identity on the world stage. So it's really that community, that dialogue between local and international.
Mark?
Yeah, nice to make your acquaintance here. First time I went to Spoleto was 25 years ago or so, and I was coming down there as part of an event that SCADA, the South Carolina Economic Development Association, was running, and it seemed like a great opportunity to promote the Charleston area and South Carolina more broadly. Do you see Spoleto evolving into more of an economic engine for Charleston, and maybe even becoming as large of event as South by Southwest is in terms of coordinating with business?
I love that comparison point. Spoleto has been incredibly impactful for the Charleston community. Since its founding in 1977, it's had an annual average economic impact of around 40 to 50 million. And since its founding, it's done well over $1 billion in economic impact, $1.4 billion actually. So you're looking at something that has really been an economic engine for Charleston, especially I think in the late 70s, 80s, and into 90s. Now Charleston has really grown. And I think that part of its flourishing artistic ecosystem, its flourishing cultural ecosystem, is due to what Spoleto has done. But there is so much more to do. I think that once you get this kind of impact that I had discussed earlier, something that really spills out into the streets, something that really has this feeling that everywhere you go, on every single street corner, something is happening during these 17 days, and you have an incredible focus, you can really increase the visibility, not just of Charleston, but of an institution like Spoleto. And we have some of the framework in place between Spoleto and Piccolo Spoleto, our sister festival that's community oriented. I think what I really think we can do is make a case for the arts not being peripheral, that the arts are connective. They remind us that we belong to each other and that there is still something beautiful and possible to build. To me, that has an incredible potential for economic impact and economic growth on the city. So building Spoleto into something that is already the premier performing arts festival of the country, but is an artistic capital of the world, is about really dreaming and thinking big and looking at some of our peers in the industry and understanding and learning from them and taking some of those lessons. I don't think of Spoleto's peers as opera companies or theater companies or ballet companies or symphonies. I think there are similarities. There are some reverberations with those types of institutions. I think Spoleto's peers are more things like the Edinburgh Festival, or things like the Frieze Art Fair, or things like South by Southwest or Telluride. These events that really focus economic impact and capital in a specific period of time.
General Director Hanna, we hear a lot about federal funding in arts, and certainly been numerous stories about the good and the bad, the controlling of costs, but also some of the problems that come when we do stop funding things like arts and education. Do you feel that particularly? And when I mean that, do you feel it emotionally maybe, but do you also feel that the federal funding dollars are not flowing to particular programs that might be in support of Spoleto, but things that are ancillary to Spoleto?
I will answer that question very specifically about federal funding dollars. And I think that, it is a difficult moment for the cultural field, generally speaking, and the arts sector. I think we have to be able to rise to that challenge. And I think we have to think very creatively about how we can diversify where we get our money from and diversify our revenue streams so that we have ways to be more financially sustainable. And I think that at the forefront of all of our collective imaginations, of our public imagination, is the understanding that the arts should be an act of public imagination. It's more than just a celebration. I think about some of the words that Joe Riley said, that the former mayor of Charleston, that the arts can serve as an example and inspiration to a community in its search for justice, equality, humanity, and excellence. So yeah, we're certainly in an age of political division and cultural cynicism. But to me, I always want to put the arts at the front of people's minds to help us, to remind us how to listen, how to ask questions without rushing to answers, how to sit in dissonance and find meaning, and how they give us tools to be citizens and not just consumers.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Hill.
Mena, I'm going to put you in a difficult position right now. Which one of the events is your favorite to go to and attend?
That's really, you're asking, that's a hard question. And we, Spoleto is an incredible entity. We're talking about 125 performances, nearly 150 events within a 17-day period. That's like a whole concert series of a performing arts center from September to June. It's like pushed into a 17-day period. So you really have to come and feel it and experience it. I am extremely excited about Patti Smith this year. I think, having performances at the Cistern, generally speaking, is just such a special experience. It's sort of like our own Red Rocks. You're sitting there under a canopy of Spanish moss amidst these mighty oak trees that have been there for hundreds of years. You're looking at Randolph Hall. You hear the cicadas in the background. It's all lit up. And, last year we had Jason Isbell perform by himself in an acoustic show. This year we have Patti Smith, Lucinda Williams, Mavis Staples, Corinne Bailey Ray, Valerie June, Jeff Tweedy, Band of Horses, MJ Lenderman, and Patterson Hood. The list goes on. And the idea behind that Cistern series is about that kind of revenue diversification. It's a way for Spoleto to be more commercial, to build a bigger tent, to bring people into the festival, and also show them that the value proposition is not just at the Cistern, but could also be at the Dock Street Theater and chamber music, could also be at the Gilliard with opera, could also be at the Satilli Theater with theater and ballet. So the idea there is bring people into the Cistern, have them experience that magic, that transformative power, and then hopefully see them go to other things during the festival period.
We've got about a minute and a half left, and I want to get this question in. The idea that you've been there now as general director for 4 years seems like, sorry to say it this way, but this gig's going to stick for you. And great reviews about your leadership down there, Dr. Hanna. Where do you want to see this festival in 10 years? What's the goal?
Great question. I think what Spoleto does that is unique is that it produces art across multiple disciplines. And it produces art across multiple disciplines and creates it in a way that when you come to the festival, it's probably the first time you see it. So for example, when we did Omar, it was a world premiere. It went to San Francisco, LA, Boston, Chapel Hill, so on and so forth after that. And that model of us being a producer of art is always going to be intrinsic to what Spoleto does. But what I want to see Spoleto do in the next 10 years is quite straightforward. We need to celebrate our legacy for the 50th festival in 2026 and 2027. We need to build public value through that period as we engage with our community. We're doing that right now with our early childhood education program, in collaboration with Wolf Trap and the South Carolina Arts Commission. And then we need to find other sort of product lines to build and create a more sustainable, effective, greater festival that is more of a festival and less of a performing arts happening. I think there are really creative ways we can do that can bring the nation together.
I'm sorry, I wish I didn't have to cut you off because I know you're excited about it. And that wasn't fair to ask you that in a minute and a half. Please come back and explain it more. But thank you for being on our program.
Thank you. Take care.
Good to see you. Gentlemen, thank you for watching. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, Truliant Federal Credit Union, Foundation for the Carolinas, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, High Point University, and by viewers like you. Thank you.